Welcome to a true spiritual adventure story like the world has never known, with your host, Dr. James Yogadhi Weldon. Good morning. This is Dr. James Weldon, Yogadhi, speaking to you from Boone, North Carolina, the community of Heavenly Mountain, the largest personal growth spiritual community, as far as I know, outside of Asia in the world. We live on 1,000 acres here in Boone, North Carolina. Huge organization has founded their headquarters here for the West, for the Art of Living Foundation. We have homes and lodging, an event center, retreat center. Today, we're finishing up the first book on living the enlightened life. We're doing the prologue for book 1, and we're introducing book 2. There's more coming. And it's a really great day. I also want to send you a link. It's possible to get a copy of my book free through Kindle, also an ebook, and it's all posted online. All the chapters have been read, and this is also available in India, all over the world on Amazon. There's a YouTube page where all the different chapters, everything that I've discussed here is now there. But in the United States, it's Easter weekend. It's appropriate. It's also a full moon weekend. This is by accident, but it's appropriate that I'm completing this major project now and going on to the second project to discuss the second book, which is of much more significance, I believe, than the first book, about how to live an enlightened life. I'm really talking about achieving higher states of consciousness. And there are higher states of consciousness. There's a lot of misunderstanding about them. In the next few decades, it's going to be much more common. According to my estimates, I can describe the mathematics. It was the chance of about 1 in 5 million that an individual would have the opportunity to come into contact with a being that was living these advanced states, to take advantage of it, to practice it, and essentially attain it. And we're talking about the fourth state of consciousness before waking, dreaming, and sleeping. Beyond that, in the Turiya or transcendental state, it's called cosmic awareness or cosmic consciousness. And there are 2 states beyond that. Many names they've been known by in different cultures. In the East, at least my teacher, spiritual teacher, called it God consciousness and unity. Even though I'm touching into some of these, the next book is going to be talking about the movement into that. And this book that I've written is really an adventure story. It's a deep mystery. It's a mystery story. And I'm looking to solve that mystery, to find out the answers. And the best way to describe one of the reasons why it's a mystery story is that suppose you had amnesia. You were living your life after that amnesia. You didn't remember your entire earlier life, even though it happened. Wouldn't you want to find an answer to that? You know, the deeper truth and the reality is we all have amnesia. We don't remember what happened before that has led us to the circumstance we're in right now. Really, honestly, truthfully, we have amnesia. The whole world has amnesia, virtually the whole world. And in my case, from the time I was a child, I had some flashbacks. You know, there's a summary of that, and it goes this way. It's the vivid, true story of a child that was haunted by visions of the past and dark dreams of a terrible life and ancient lives in the distant lands of Tibet. I had nightmares from the time I was a young child, 4 or 5 years old. You haven't listened to those parts of the book, you're not going to understand the later parts. As I grew up, I found some clues, and I had some experience which I still, at this point in my life, at the end of this book, basically about 20 years have passed. And as I grew up, I found some clues, and I met a mysterious enlightened being who gave me an incredible gift in a place that I didn't understand, essentially on an illuminated plane of light. And this was the first of 3 who I consider spiritual giants that would guide me for many years. And it would someday be known to many millions. I said many millions. It's much more than that now. And I invited 2 of my friends to join me in discussing and hearing about this deeply personal spiritual journey that I passed through. And honestly, as far as I can tell, showed the possibility of an immortal light. This has been held back now for some years. A few people have read it. There have been some wonderful works that have been written. I was inspired when I was growing up to read about Paramahansa Yogananda and his experiences and ventures, but he didn't really talk about it this way, laying it all out, just sharing it. The good times, the warts, the terrible times, the desperation, and all of that. You know, there have been, of course, many great beings in this world that have come throughout history. I was reading and seeing the story of Einstein and all the terrible difficulties he passed through to try to bring a deeper understanding of the unified field, of the connectedness of all things. If you've looked at the spiritual traditions of the world in all cultures, from time to time, there have been teachers that have come up and have taught in a manner understandable by those cultures. But at the end of this book, the mystery still remains. Yes, there has been some very deep insight and experience, but in a deeper sense, the unveiling of the story behind the story has yet to happen. And in my own search, I'm seeking for answers to what my life is about. I said in the beginning that the events of my life don't matter. And the experiences, although there had been many, in a certain sense, those don't matter as well. What matters is the bigger perspective that this is all our common adventure. And the story of these great adventures in history comes down to us sometimes clear and sometimes confused. And the great seers or knowers who try to penetrate into the deeper aspects of reality, they lived that, but they didn't share that. As far as I know, no one has ever shared certainly like this. And there's a reason for it. First of all, the technology was not available. When I originally wrote that book, I had 3 main pages of what I'd passed through. And it had so befuddled me, so surprised me, so amazed me, that I got to the point in my life, I just needed to get it out of me. I needed to let go. And the original book that was written now, that had been completed at this point in my life, after over 20 years being on this, teaching this, but this is a huge phenomenon that's happening right now. Huge. Unknowingly, I'm telling you, there are tens and tens and tens of millions of people involved here at this point, around the world, globally. And there's a huge phenomenon. I said a little earlier that in the earlier days, you know, in the past ages, it was almost impossible to gain access to such direct insight. You see, you don't know what you don't know. But there are really beings that do know. And if you want to make progress in that arena, you need to come into contact with them. With the benefit of the culture, the worldwide internet, this is now available to the entire planet. Billions of people can listen to it. In this autobiography, I'm attempting to pull together many threads that are common. I'm saying that I was born with amnesia. Everybody is. We pop out of nowhere. And when this limited time is over, we disappear. And you know, when we come into this world, we're like this. Actually, our hands are like this, we're holding on. This is actually a particular exercise which draws energy to the head, and the children are like this. But when we're finished here, we go out like this. And every single thing that you hold so dear right now, your family, everything, everything. If you had a peep into the inner dimension and the tremendous joy within you, those that have had out-of-the-body experiences, that have actually died in some cases, they will tell you that during that experience, the clear ones, they would be willing to just leave it all. And of course, some of them come back and talk about that. But this is the same pathway that we move when we move through the 7 layers of our existence, beyond the body, beyond the breath, beyond the mind, beyond the memories, beyond the intellect, beyond the ego. To that place, there is a level of life talked about as the final attainment. And the whole purpose of this is to help provide a bridge so people can begin to understand that. My conclusion at the end of this work, written all of this out, and then after it was done, I wondered, what should I do with it? Who would believe it? And it's sad. And I looked at it very carefully. And even so, what's nice about sharing this way is you don't see all the little tiny errors in that book that are there, because I didn't have a professional staff to edit it. And I do believe that we are in a time of tremendous awakening in the world. I've ran some numbers to get an idea of what I've been told, what I understand, what's coming. And in the past, the probability is, with adults in the world, given the size of the population of the world now, before the event of the internet and technology, the chance is like 1 in 5 million. Not a good chance. But by the end of this process, I believe it's going to be much more down to something reasonable, like 1 in 250 in the world. And that this state I'm talking about, it is the next natural state of human evolution, this cosmic awareness. It's just like the possibility of the internet was always there. Yet without the technology, we couldn't connect to it. There are many of you friends here that are listening from all over the world. I'm not looking for anything. Zero. I'm looking for clarity in my own experience and hoping to inspire people to get on with the journey, get on with your discovery and personal verification. And I welcome complete skepticism, because ultimately all of this doesn't need to be believed. It does need to be progressively experienced and validated. Otherwise, it's just like another set of clothes. If you were to take whatever great teachings existed in this world that have come down from us, from the cultures, and you went back and you were able to walk alongside or be people that went through those things, it would be very different than the histories that came down. Very different, because when stories are told, they're retold, things are added, they're subtracted. In the East, they've had a tremendous benefit, and that there's another class of insight, which I've tried to describe here in the book, which is called prajna, knowing, direct knowledge. And we've had some of that in the West, a very little amount, but some of that. If you look at the big works in the world, let's say the Mahabharata, that the Gita comes out, Bhagavad Gita, or if you talk about the huge epic stories going back even farther, perhaps 10,000 years back, of the Ramayana and Rama. It wasn't that someone was sitting around, following these people and writing the story down. That didn't happen. When these events happened, perhaps thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, possibly, were witness to these events, and also in what people think are other aspects of the culture. Muhammad and Abraham, please excuse me if I don't get the words perfect. The adventures they passed through and the insights that they had influenced huge numbers of people. So what happened? How did these events come up? Well, there were special beings, spiritually advanced. It was an earlier time in our history. You may think that we have the only advanced culture that's ever existed on our planet. I beg to differ. That although the earlier times were not so advanced, let's say, in the technology that we're talking about, in terms of computers, about the internet, those people had extraordinary memory and subtle insight that is not available very much now. But that is changing. That's what's happening in the world right now. And they were able to look into the, let's say, cosmic memory bank and see those events spontaneously. But there were certain beings called Rishis in those cultures that were able to see into those events in a super high state called super consciousness state, and they unfolded, and then they wrote those down. And in the case of some of them, this happened multiple times by different insight Rishis that were able to have such an insight, and the separate records were written and they correlated. They were the same. This hasn't happened for the great and wonderful and beautiful tradition of Christianity, and I suspect that it probably hasn't happened for Islam. But what if that did happen? What if that did happen? We'll see. The next book that we're going to be starting here needs to be a separate book, because the phenomenon that I'm going to explain there, in my mind, is so huge, it just can't be part of this. In a certain sense, the journey that I passed through is complete. It appeared as though at least the attainment of a certain insight had happened, but there were still a lot of mysteries yet to unfold. And so to do justice to what I passed through, that is a separate book. And that title, still an autobiography, because it's just my point of view, but the rise of what I consider the first true world teacher. The rise of that. And it would be really nice if we could sit on the shoulder of these great beings of the past, ancient history, and watch that. In a certain sense, that consciousness, that Rishi consciousness, does enable that. Can enable that. Let me put it that way. Can enable, not necessarily does. It's a mystery. Enjoy the adventure. I do appreciate you taking the time to be with me and listen. And I feel tremendous joy for the opportunity to just have placed it in, the archives, all of the episodes about this phase and story that is yet to come. My goodness, our life is an adventure, a tremendous adventure, and honestly, my dear friends, greater than any play, book, the reality of that has ever been written. I love to go to these superhero shows. I enjoy that, but unfortunately, they're all talking about battles. But the real battle, I'm telling you, in the inner dimension of our life is bigger. We haven't made that discovery, but mankind is going to be waking up to this state we're talking about. It's so natural. And many people are going to be coming into it, huge numbers in the world. Now, there really will be a new age coming out of that. We've been through the age of technology, the Industrial Revolution. I believe the next major step is in the field of consciousness, the potentiality of consciousness, and the ability to know and develop these inner capabilities. But the greatest capability is to experience who and what we are, which cannot be told. It cannot be told. If somebody tells you this is it, they don't know. Those that know will not tell you. They can point, they can assist, they can guide, but because the answer to that can only be lived. So join me again. Thank you for listening. See you shortly. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us in our YouTube channel, books, podcast episodes on living the enlightened life, an autobiography with your host, Dr. James Yogadhi Weldon.